Welcome to Vendetta Sports Media. This is Eight Sided Freaks. Today, we are here to recap an absolutely stacked UFC 312 pay per view. It's so stacked, we're only going to have time for the first two fights. Um, Joking, obviously, but we are here to recap UFC 312. We are only going to talk about the first two fights because those are really the only two fights that are worth doing full recaps for. Then we're going to hit final thoughts. So it's the same format as we did last week for the preview. And then when we're done with the 312 recap, we are going to hit a little bit of a preview for UFC 312. That is main event, Cannonier versus Gregory Rodrigues. Co-main event, Kelvin Kattar versus Youssef Zalal. So we've got two, I guess prospects a good word for Zalal. Rodrigues is 32. I wouldn't necessarily call him a prospect. That doesn't necessarily feel genuine, but he is
But
looking ranked for the first time. So
yeah, and I was gonna say he's like the fact that exactly what you say. He just got ranked, and it's like he's not a young prospect, but he's still an up and comer, moving up the division and taking those steps. So I think that's not a bad way to compare it.
yeah. And then once we hit those two fights, we're gonna do final thoughts as always. And then depending on the time, we'll give our thoughts on the Josh Emmett and Lerone Murphy matchup. Um, So that is the schedule for today. We will start it off right at the UFC 312 main event. Sean Strickland versus Dricus Duplessis. Duplessis wins with the scorecards of 50-45, 50-45, 49-46. Not sure where the judge got the one Strickland round, but that's kind of besides the point. Duplessis dominant on the scorecards, dominant throughout the fight. What did you make of his performance?
The word you just said, domination. Sean Strickland looked like he had no right being in the octagon with Duplessis. It was so one sided, every aspect. I'm with you. I scored it 50-45. I thought it, I didn't see a round that Sean won. Maybe he could have gotten one of the early rounds, but even then, it's like, that's kind of just grasping at straws a little bit. No, this was the definition of a dominant performance, and we saw what we saw. It was pretty straightforward. I think the fight was over well before the Sean's nose got shattered. But I will say, fair play to him. He kept trying to go forward and after his nose got busted and did what he did. But I'm curious to see what's next, especially after all the talks of his coaches were so disappointed in him and all that talk. I think, did you do the story on that?
Yeah, I did the story about how Eric Nixick basically wasn't happy.
Yeah.
Um, wasn't impressed with the performance, wanted to see more urgency, said something along the lines of, I want to coach world champions. Does he want to be a world champion?
Right.
Um, Sean came out and said, I haven't done the follow-up to it yet. Which is Sean coming out and saying that, Nixick probably isn't going to be in his corner again. So there's that fallout as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, he didn't look like he wanted to win. He didn't look like he was trying to get the belt back. Looked like a shade of himself from the first fight. And I still think the first fight was not extremely one sided as this one, but it was still DDP won pretty convincingly, in my opinion. It wasn't nearly as close as people were trying to make it out going into this last fight. But it's one of those things that Duplessis did everything he had to. He landed some takedowns. Still one of the ugliest striking matchups you can have in the UFC, but somehow it works for him. He does chaos and it just kind of falls into place. But no, overall, this fight was easy for DDP, it seemed.
Yeah. So I want to start on the Strickland side of things, but I do want to preface that by saying I thought Duplessis had a really good performance. So I don't really want to gloss over that aspect. I'm going to circle back to that, but I want to start with the Sean Strickland side because for those who have tuned in to the podcast before, or those who tuned in pre-podcast when we were doing the Daily Show, talking about fights, you're looking at not a Sean Strickland fan. Sean Strickland. I'll, I try not to be a hater, but I'll just say I'm a hater a little bit. And the reasons for that are A, I think he's overrated. B, you got to listen to him scream about how, he's going to do the man dance and he's going to bleed and it's going to be a war. And then he goes out there and point fights for 25 minutes and really doesn't finish anybody. All his fights go to decision. And like, I just don't think he's that good. And then you have to deal with his fans telling you that he won fights that he lost. For example, the first Duplessis fight, the Cannonier fight. Every time he loses a fight and it hits the judges' scorecards, aside from this one, because Duplessis beat him so handedly, you have to listen to people talk about how it was a robbery, but it wasn't. So like I'm so far over the Sean Strickland um shenanigans. And the worst part is I've had people tell me they tuned in. I had more feedback for this fight, just casually day to day, people wanting to watch for Sean Strickland. And then he goes out there and lays that egg when I don't think people know what they're getting themselves into when it's a Strickland Duplessis fight. Like that's not your average UFC fight, first of all. And then second of all, you don't deliver with a good fight. It really annoys me. And I think this fight was a lot of the things that frustrate me from Strickland. His coaches have a game plan for him. He doesn't follow it. Instead, he opts to go out there, throw some jabs. He really didn't even throw very many combinations. I think he threw 2 or 3 in the early rounds and didn't really do much with them, but
It
he
was
didn't
just
throw in
yeah,
combination.
it was constant jab and move and jab and back up and
He didn't even teep. Like,
no,
he wasn't
no,
even doing
there's
that part
nothing.
of his game plan either, which is usually, like, the Paulo Costa fight, there was way too much teep, and now there's no teep, and it's like, well, the guy's just walking you down, maybe throw a teep once in a while, that might be a decent game plan. So I thought it was a really bad performance, and I agree with everything that Eric Nixon said in his
Mhm.
criticisms of, it didn't really feel like he came out to fight. And then to me, it felt like the nose getting broken was ended up being a pretty good excuse for him. He still got his moment of like, oh, I broke my nose, but man, boy, did I snap that back into place. And I kept fighting. And it's like, but you talk like before the fights, you talk like that even isn't even a big thing for you. But all you did was snap it back in place and survive, which I mean, credit to him for that. But also the way he talks, you'd think that was like not even, you think that'd be step one for him. Like you'd think that would be something he does all the time, the way he talks about his own performances, but it's not. And um, when push came to shove here, he did not have a great performance. And I think Dean Thomas, another person who criticized Sean, put it well. Push comes to shove. He's not really that guy. If there was any time he needed to go make it dirty, make it a scrap, make it a war, to have a shot because he was clearly getting out techniqued, um, he didn't do that. He didn't come close to doing that. Instead, he looked like he resigned himself to losing a decision in the fourth round. The second his nose broke, it looked like surviving was just enough for him. And then he gets on the mic and acts like I'm not gonna say acted like he won because he didn't, but like he wasn't that beat up about it. And I didn't feel like he was too upset about losing. It's like you just got dog walked for 25 minutes and you get on the mic and act like, everything like you won. It was a wild thing for me. Um on the flip side, I do want to give Duplessis a little bit of credit as well because um, he had to go out there and he hit so hard and he's always in the pocket. And I don't imagine that Duplessis is a guy that you exactly love to stand across from for 25 minutes because of how hard he hits, because of how physical he is. I imagine it does make it hard to open up and throw offense, knowing that you can get hit with one of his hammers. I think Duplessis did a really good job of mixing in more kicks this time around. Surprised he didn't wrestle more, but he didn't need to. So I'm not going to criticize him too much. It felt like, if those rounds were close, maybe he could have went and got some takedowns, but like he's winning rounds so widely on the feet that don't even bother wrestling. He still managed to land some really big shots, like we talked about the nose break. Thought he was going to finish Sean at a couple points, but overall, for a guy who looks a little bit ugly, I thought he was very effective. And I thought his cardio held up considering the amount of volume and pace that he was pushing for 25 minutes. So lots of respect for Duplessis' performance, even if the headline is, man, did Sean Strickland look like trash? Like I said, part of that is because of Duplessis, and also, want to give Duplessis his respect for, I mean, if you look at fight one and fight two, he won both, but he left no questions this time around, which was important for him.
No, it was exactly that. There was no, oh, maybe Sean won this or maybe Sean was robbed. It was silence from the Sean Strickland fan club. And I'm going to loop back to that point you made a little earlier. I was like, I had so many people who were like, oh, we're casual UFC fans. We want Sean Strickland to win. I don't know if it's just because he's American or if they're like, oh, this guy's entertaining. He always talks the talk. Let's watch him walk the walk. He doesn't do that. It's never been his style. The one time he tried to go balls to the wall, he did. He won. He beat Izzy. I will say he did put the pressure on, and it seemed like after the first couple rounds, even before the nose break, he wasn't moving forward. He wasn't trying to do anything. He was just allowing DDP to walk him down. And as you said, when a guy punches that hard, that's a bad idea. That's not a great strategy. And I'm really curious to see what's next for Sean Strickland because I don't think he can have a worse performance than he did last Saturday.
Yeah. I want to touch on what's next for Duplessis first, but I'm also interested in what's next for Strickland. So let's kind of move on to the what's next side of things. It feels like the Duplessis aspect is the two middleweights are Chimaev and Imavov. Last week I said I would like to see both of them get another title fight without fighting someone else. That is still completely fine with me, but I am heavy on the Chimaev getting it first. To me, that is like beyond a shadow of a doubt. So I think Chimaev should have got the shot over Strickland to begin with, which in hindsight would have been more productive for the division as a whole, would have been a better fight. There would have been a lot of benefits to that, but that is out the window at this point. Let's just line Chimaev up next and have him fight Duplessis. Imavov can sit out and wait, in my opinion. I know some people are saying Brawlhell versus Imavov. I don't hate that. But I think Imavov with a win over Izzy earned the right to sit out, and I wouldn't hate Brawlho being a name that you match up a Whitaker or a Strickland against. I think those are some options for Brawlho to where he doesn't need to fight Imavov. And, you know, I'm happy with where the middleweight division is right now. I feel like we've got some fun and interesting contenders, some guys we haven't seen fight for the title in Chimaev, in Imavov, in Brawlho. So I don't really want to burn the Brawlho and Imavov matchup and leave ourselves with one. So big on the Chimaev side. And similarly, I think a lot of people have said Alex Pereira. I am not too keen on Duplessis going up to Pereira because of the state that 205 is in. I don't think going up is necessarily a great idea when your division is ripe with challengers for the first time, fresh faces for a while. So I'd like to see some of these intriguing matchups play out at 185 pounds before we consider Duplessis moving up.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Khamzat Chimaev's the next fight. It should be the next title fight. I agree with you in the fact that it should have been this last title fight. But we got Sean Strickland instead, and now we don't have to worry about him as much. And it just opens the door. Khamzat's undefeated. He's a big name, growing name in the sport for sure. Casuals know who, or like not in a bad way, but like he's a name that people know. You don't have to be a diehard UFC fan. You know who Khamzat Chimaev is if you're just watching every once in a while. That'll sell way more, I think, than Imavov. I mean, does he deserve to have a title fight, Imavov? Yes. But I'm fine with him sitting out, waiting, let Khamzat have the opportunity. And that's where I think this division gets really interesting because you have the Khamzat fight, the winner of that fight, Imavov. And in the meantime, see like a Barallo fight, Sean Strickland or Robert Whitaker or Izzy or someone in that top 5 to be like, okay, we've seen him beat all these other guys. Can he beat people who have been in title fights and do all that? So fine with that. I'm not opposed as much as I think you are to the move to 205, only because Alex Perez already beat Yuri twice. Or was it Yuri once? Why am I blanking?
Twice,
yeah. Yuri twice. He's beat Jamal Hill. Maybe he fights Jan if he gets by Magomed Ankalaev. But otherwise, like, I don't need to see him fight a Carlos Ulberg, a Khalil Roundtree again, any of those other guys. So that's the only reason. And I think that's more from the Alex Pereira side of things and less the DDP. So there's that. The other one
I understand for the point. I do understand that perspective. So I was kind of looking at it from the 185 lens, but it does make more sense when you're looking at it through the 205 lens. So I do see that point.
And that's the thing for me. And they've talked the talk. I'm looking at it from the 205 lens clearly, but it's like he's already beating all these guys. If he goes out and beats Magomed Ankalaev, Jan Blachowicz is the only other one that might be deserving of a title shot in that division.
He's got Oberg next, so
Yeah,
that's that
exactly. So
matchup.
that's So they've got that fight, and I think that lines up pretty well. The winner of that potentially fights the winner of Pereira and Ankalaev, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't hate it. The one I do hate is I hate the talks of Islam trying to go up to and talking about going up to 185 and fighting DDP. I think that's stupid.
Yeah, it's a
We
waste of
talked
time.
about that on the last show I was on, which was a couple of weeks ago. Was he needs to clear out the next few contenders, then he can move up to 170. But I don't think he would fight Bilal Muhammad. Hopefully, we don't see that much longer. I saw rumors that Bilal and Shavkat Rakhmonov will be fighting at 315, I think it was, but those are rumors, nothing official. So
Yeah, and just to quickly interject, who in the hell knows what's going on with the pay-per-views right now? Because
oh,
we
yeah.
got 313 lined up, but there's no 314
No.
main event, and I mean, clock is ticking. The fight's happening. So unless I got something signed in the background, but like, I mean, we're getting really close. Nobody has said it, but like, we're getting close to. Hey, how often are we looking at 312 in a recap and don't have the two pay-per-views ahead? You only have one pay-per-view main event scheduled. How often does that happen? So I
Yeah.
just want to throw that out there that I don't see anybody talking about that, but in my head, I'm going any day now.
Because, I mean, you look at it, we're recording February 14th. UFC 314 is by 2 days, less than 2 months away. The only rumored title fight I've even seen was Alexander Pantoja and Kai Kara France, but it sounds like Pantoja's kind of nixed that whole idea of fighting Kai Kara France. So it's weird. We're in a weird leeway that seems like it wasn't this way last year, but I know last year was 300, 299, all that stuff. But it just seems like we're lacking some matchmaking at the moment. And maybe it's people just don't want to fight, don't want to risk losing the belt.
Yeah.
Or it's a lack of, or it's more on the other side, like certain divisions, there's a bunch of contenders who are all kind of fighting each other. And you need those to happen to actually single out someone to fight for the belt.
Yeah. I will also say that I've seen the Topuria and Volkanovski 314 thrown around a lot, but that is now seems on the wayside because every time you see anything new, it's now pointed towards Ilya and Makhachev. And every time you hear Ilya talk, he's talking about lightweight. He did an interview talking about, could you imagine me going up to lightweight, fighting Islam, fighting Charles, Dustin, Gaethje? How great are all those fights? And he's not wrong. He's not wrong at all. So who knows what's going on with him?
Yeah, that division, after being so good and we're finally having some promising prospects, it seems like we're in that weird shit show in a way that it's like we can't figure out what's going on next. And it seems like Topuria just needs to make up his mind. Is he going to keep trying to defend this belt or is he going to move up? One way or another, we need to see that. So 314 is looking real suspect at the moment.
Yeah. So back to 312. I let us off on the Duplessis. What's next for Duplessis? You want to lead the way on what you think should be next for Strickland?
Yeah, I mean, there's one name for me, and it's Izzy, Israel Adesanya. They're both coming off a loss. Izzy's lost 3 in a row. Strickland's lost 2 in a row.
Well,
Why
he's
not?
got the Paulo Costa win, but do
Oh,
you
that's
count
right.
that?
I did. Yeah, I did forget about that a bit. But
It's forgettable.
yeah, it wasn't exactly the most. The only thing I remember is him flying through the air with some teep kicks 90% of the time.
Talk about going to war and doing the man dance. That was
terrible. Almost as bad as Izzy and oh god, who was it? Yo Romero. They talked all the talk and then nothing happened. So
yeah.
no, I'm fine. I still think those two probably have a little bit of beef to settle. Izzy wants to get it back, and that's the only one I can think of for Sean Strickland, unless it's fighting like a guy coming up, so a Kai Barallo, a Brendan Allen. God, could not imagine a Marvin Vettori and Sean Strickland fight again. So
yeah. So I agree on the Izzy side of things. And part of that is also going, who is Izzy going to fight? And it's
exactly.
just a lot of it doesn't make sense, especially considering, what happens if Cannonier wins this weekend? Like Cannonier versus Izzy, they've fought. How far do you move him down in the rankings? some of the matchups, like, I don't love. Like, I still want to see Izzy go out there and strike with fighters because he's given us great fights. Like, do we want to book him against the winner of Brendan Allen versus Fluffy Hernandez? He probably beats Brendan Allen, but like Fluffy Hernandez is probably as hard of a grappling matchup as you can give Izzy. So, like, how productive is that really for anybody aside from Fluffy when you can just give him someone different to move up and fight when it doesn't have to be Izzy? Um, so I just don't really understand a lot of the things going on with Adesanya that would make a lot of sense. But then me and Anthony talked about this last week as well. The Strickland fight makes a ton of sense because everyone's going, oh, does Izzy still have it? And I think he does. I still think Izzy is very, very, very talented. Possible his durability is slipped, but I think his talent is still clear. And a lot of people go, well, what's he fighting for? If he's not fighting for titles, what's he fighting for? He's done it all. Well, I think just fighting purely to get back at Sean Strickland, even if that's the last one, I think that is something that can get him out of bed. And if you're Sean Strickland, do you want that fight or do you want Kyle Baralho? Or, Robert Whittaker makes a little bit of sense in the same way that Adesanya does.
Yep.
But,
they have, pardon me, they haven't fought yet, have they? Strickland and Whittaker?
no, because that was one that we were asking for last year
Yep.
when we're trying to figure out who should fight for the middleweight title. It's like, well, let's just Strickland. Or there was the point in time before Whittaker lost to Chimaev when it's, trying to figure out who's fighting for the title. Well, Whittaker and Strickland just could have fought and figured it all out, but then Whittaker gets the Chimaev fight instead, so they never fought. But that one makes sense as well. I think that's a good second option. I also like the Kyle Baralho fight. I'd like a Fluffy Hernandez fight. So I actually think there are some names out there for Strickland. It's just a matter of how he wants to approach it. And if I were him, why wouldn't you want to fight Strickland? If you want to still be in high profile, or excuse me, if you're Strickland, why wouldn't you want to fight Izzy? If you want to be in a high profile fight, I mean, is there a more high profile fight than that for him? Aside from, I mean, it's probably not even aside from anything. Like, Chimaev maybe, but that's like down the road, assuming Chimaev loses to DDP. Like,
bad as well for him.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and I just think that Izzy Strickland fight you can really sell from a matchmaking and storylines perspective. And guess what? Now the winner's got some life. I mean, we're talking about Strickland having more fans than we expect. Izzy definitely has fans, so the winner would be in a little bit of a better position. So that's the way that I would definitely approach it.
Yeah, no, I'm perfectly fine with that. I mean, the only other one, just because I feel like it would be, I think the fight would probably suck, and I don't think it would ever happen in a million years. But I've seen Colby Covington like hints at, I might move up, or he might fight Dustin Poirier and all that. But I feel like that would be one of the wildest press conferences if Colby Covington, who's also been getting whooped time and time again recently, goes up, fights Sean Strickland. They're pretty much the same person, except one wrestles more and one stands up and strikes more, or throws jabs more, I guess. Not strike.
Yeah. Colby Covington, I saw in the interview yesterday, he's talking about transitioning over to WWE within the next 2 years. So
Jesus.
I thought he was going to go the podcast route, but I kind of see his thought process with the WWE route. So
you can go fight Logan Paul.
Yeah. All right. Switching down to the co-main, we had Weili Zhang go out there 49-46. Actually, that might not have been the final scorecard. Had she won 4 rounds, she might have got a 10-8 or 2 in there. Very dominant in the later rounds. She only lost the first round. Tatiana, this was a great win for her because a lot of people talk about Tatiana as like she was the hyper prospect of that division. She's the one that everyone thought was going to be great. And Jerry, you were the only one who picked Weili. So a lot of us were sipping that Tatiana Suarez Kool-Aid. What'd you make of this matchup, and what'd you make of how the fight went?
Almost 2 years off for Tatiana Suarez showed the ring rust, and that was the whole reason I kind of picked Weili. Was like, I can see Weili doing more, and I can't really see. I see more of a flaw in Tatiana Suarez. I see her being tired, struggling late in the rounds, and Weili's just going to keep going. And sure enough, that's what ended up happening. The first round, she looked, I will say, Tatiana Suarez looked great in the first round, pretty dominant in that. But after that, she kind of looked like she was tiring. Weili was just going about business as usual, and it was just domination once again for the last 4 rounds. In my opinion, at least, I thought it was pretty one-sided for the rest of that fight.
Yep. So, I thought that fight was gonna look a lot more like the first round, and that was my concern with Weili was when she got taken down, what would she look like off her back? And frankly, I was correct in that answer. Where I was incorrect was how often Tatiana would be able to land the takedown. Um,
Yeah, I mean, she went 1 for 15.
exactly. The one was like, oh man, she really did something here. But after that, um, Weili was, first of all, shutting down the grappling um, at a very, very, very impressive rate. Um, she also got on top in the first round, so that should also be noted. But um, she was not only defending in the first round or in the second through fifth round, but she was also striking off the break. So she landed like one exchange, she lands a big elbow when Tatiana doesn't get the takedown. A couple times, Weili managed to get to top position. So it wasn't even like everything was like, oh, can't grapple, get away, which there's nothing wrong with that when you're going 1 for 15 on defending the takedown. That's a perfectly fine strategy. But she even wrestled back on occasion, which if you're wrestling back, that means you are putting yourselves in more grappling scenarios, more scenarios to get put on your back when you're engaging in the grappling. And she was able to engage in the grappling, get on top, get herself in good positions, almost landed a submission at one point. I don't remember the round, but she was on top, almost landed that arm triangle from top position. And that's not even counting what she did on the feet in the striking realm. I mean, everybody kind of knew, I think, that was going to be a little bit of a wash. Even myself, who picked Tatiana, said, if we're striking, it ain't going to look good for Tatiana, and it didn't.
I mean, you look at the last 3 rounds, and I just added up. Tatiana Suarez was outstruck 149-37 just in the last 3 rounds. Overall, 232-63. We knew this was going to be either a stand-up fight and Weili's going to win, or it's going to be a grappling match, and Tatiana probably would have won. But fair play to Weili for her takedown defense.
Yep. And this was another performance, or excuse me, the other thing of this in a striking aspect was kind of saw a little bit of what we saw in the last fight, what we said about Duplessis, and standing with Duplessis, like there's just a level of physicality coming back that is rarely seen. Um, Same can be said for Weili. Like when Weili's standing across from you, she has a level of physicality that is really rare. Tatiana has some physicality as well, but it's more in the grappling realm. And that's another thing I thought. I thought, well, Tatiana has, physicality that Weili hasn't seen. Well, guess what? Same thing could be said in reverse, and it had a lot bigger of an impact on Tatiana than Weili. So, I do want to say that as someone who picked Tatiana, I was obviously wrong, and but I do want to say that I thought this is the best Weili has looked in a minute. I thought she looked better here than she did in the Yan Xiaonan fight. She had good moments in that, but there was also some concern in there. Looked better in my opinion than the Lemos fight. I think she looked outstanding here. Now, obviously, we all expected the striking, but the fact that she for 4 rounds was the better grappler as well is really, really, really impressive to me.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like, sure, Tatiana Suarez hasn't fought since August of 2023, but my big concern coming in with her, and it was a little bit of that, was you look at the names she's fought. Sure, she fought Carla Esparza in 2018, Alexa Grasso in 2018. Alexa Grasso moved divisions. Carla Esparza somehow won the belt shortly after that, or I mean, it's 4 years after that. But it's like she wasn't.
Grasso also can't grapple, and
No, exactly.
Carla Esparza's level of physicality, we saw
Yep,
what happened when she fought Weili.
yep, no, exactly. And it's like these are their names, but they're not good fights for her. She beat Jessica Andrade in her last fight, and like I was at that fight. She kind of bodied her, but that was when Jessica Andrade is kind of going downhill. So it's just like the resume. She didn't seem like she was the only option in my opinion for a title fight. But at the same time, it's like I felt like she needed to beat a couple more high ranked people, if not just like one more. Like beat a Zhao beat a Verna Jandiroba, do something like that against these other ladies, and it's just like she just didn't seem championship material on this weekend.
Yeah, and I think the very last thing you said, the fact that she didn't seem championship material, that's really what stood out to me as well, because I think Tatiana Suarez has long been touted as someone who would eventually touch gold. And I think that was implied in the betting lines. I think it was implied in a lot of people who picked her, was that she's always been the prospect who is going to touch gold. Um, but in the five things we learned article, one of my takeaways was that Tatiana Suarez, I thought, I just don't think she's gonna live up to the potential she once had, and it's really not her fault. I don't think it's from a lack of hard work. I don't think it's from a lack of commitment. I think it's just purely from injuries. Um,
Yeah,
first of all, she had cancer before she even fought in the UFC, so like that's a big enough thing to even get in the octagon. Um, she comes back from that, and then right when she's hitting her peak, she has to go out. She's out for 2 years with neck, and I believe it was neck and back. Neck for sure was the
big.
bad one,
I think it was
but
back as well.
yeah, and she's out for 2 years, then she comes back and, um, I think she was out for more than 2 years, actually. I'd have to look again, but she was out for a lengthy period of time, point being. Um, and then even after she comes back, she's dealing with more minor injuries that stack up. And, you're putting yourself out of a training room for a long time. Like, you don't get better at MMA by not doing MMA, and you don't get better at wrestling by not wrestling. That's things we see that a lot with fighters who just ignore their wrestling. They get worse at it. A lot of college wrestlers or guys who were submitting people earlier in their career, they stopped using the wrestling and it's not as good. Well, that wasn't even the case for Tatiana. She just could not use it because she wasn't healthy enough to. And as unfortunate as it is, at 34 years old and her activity level and her injury history, the chances that she reaches her potential that she had when she won the Ultimate Fighter is probably less than 1%. As unfortunate as it is, I don't love saying that, but I just think that's the reality of the situation.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It's she seems at this point in her career, injuries have just played too much. This fight showed there are levels to this game because not like Yao Xiaonan was competitive that much with Weili, but it was definitely a little closer. This was night and day. This was so dominant after the first round for Weili that she's like, I wonder if she just had something to prove. Tatiana Suarez came in 10-0, and everyone was like, oh, just as you mentioned earlier, the betting lines were favoring Tatiana. Everyone was like, she's going to win this week. Weili's done for her now. And as you mentioned earlier, Weili looked as good as she has in a long time. So it shows that there's levels to this game. And this was a little too many levels up for Tatiana Suarez.
I agree. Um, looking at what's next for Weili, are you in the camp? The one that's been talked about is Valentina Shevchenko, the double champ fight. Are you in that? Are you in that crowd that wants to see that?
I mean, my only issue that like, I would love to see that fight, but I want to see Valentina fight Menel Furor first. But I don't know. Just because feel like Fior's earned her shot. She's if she misses out on this title fight because they bring up Weili, she's aging herself out, and that's going to be an issue. So I would love to see that fight first, but I'm fine with that. Otherwise, maybe a Jandanova, but otherwise, Weili's pretty much beat everybody else in this division of note throughout the division's history. So I don't really I'm fine. I'm fine with the Valentina Shevchenko fight. I just want to see Shevchenko fight Fior first because I don't want to see her get skipped over when she doesn't have much time left, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you because I look at what's gone on at 125, and we had to see Valentina and Alexa Grasso go out there and fight 3 times. Took up years of the division's championship window. They set out forever to get those two to fight at UFC Noche. They fought at UFC Noche for fight 2 and 3. Those were a year apart. Um, so like I just feel like that division right now is primed with the most talent it has ever had.
Mhm.
and we're just doing nothing at the championship level. So it is frustrating when you bring up somebody from 115 pounds when you have
Yeah,
Benone Fior who's been getting screwed over for months as the
yeah,
fact that she hasn't fought for the title. Um, you have other fighters looking to get there, whether it be your Macy Barbers, your Natalia Silvas. Where are these girls at? These girls aren't fighting. I can tell you why they're not fighting, because what are we going to do? Build 4 championship contenders while the champs sit out? Like, unfortunately, that's not really something the UFC can afford to do. We can't really just have all these good prospects fight each other to never get a fight for the championship. And now we have to think about bringing the 115-pound champ up. And the worst part is, Weili deserves it.
yeah.
And she doesn't have anyone to fight at 115. And so you either have to decide whether you want to screw Manon Fior in the rest of the division, or whether you want to screw Weili and have her do whatever the hell against Verna Jandiroba in a fight that nobody wants to see.
I
So,
still wipe the floor with Verna.
yeah,
Gen-
exactly.
So it's like there's no point in having that fight. But at the same time, it's the division above is crazy.
Yep. And I do want to say, I think Valentina gets packed up pretty bad by Manon or Weili.
I
Like, I
agree.
think this one's coming. Like, it's
Oh
a
yeah,
both those girls are girls who can put you in a box, and I think Valentina has aged horribly. She's not as fast as she used to be. She had to win that third Grasso fight off grappling purely, and she's not even that good of a grappler. She should have lost to Talia Santos because she can't grapple. And she goes out there, she's winning fights with her grappling because hell, Alexa Grasso looks like she didn't know forgot what a takedown was when she got put in the octagon. Um, and that goes back to the point of those two not being the best 2 women in the weight class. So
no.
whichever of these 2 get the shot, if I'm either of these girls, I'm begging to fight Valentina, knowing you're the one who gets to go out there and end this championship run for her. When the first one was a good one, now you're just kind of, I mean, it's gonna look good, but like either of these girls will do her bad, bad, bad.
Oh, I agree. And I mean, you brought up the point of like she had to rely on takedowns against Alexa Grasso in the last fight. She is nowhere nearly as good at the grappling game as Tatiana Suarez, in my opinion. And we
Mhm.
saw what Weili did to Tatiana Suarez.
Yeah,
I think it would be super one sided as well. And I mean, it's fun to see it, a double champ, but
yeah.
at the same time, like the thing is, what's next? What if she doesn't do that? She fights John Jaroba, and then what?
Who knows, man? That's the
There's,
thing.
there's nothing going forward, so you might as well just move up a division, fight for that double belt status, and
The
see
better
what.
question is, what the hell happens if she leaves and we got to have 2 girls fight for the belt?
God.
Like that. Rose should start cutting weight again if that's what happens. Because
Yep.
I've not a fan of Rose either from a skills perspective. Think she's on the decline, but like, my God, get down there. Same with like Hebos and all these tweeners. Like, start your cut because 125 is better than 15 by a landslide. So,
Yeah, there's no true contending prospects at 120 or 115. That's
hmm
said earlier. We have Natalia Silva, Macy Barber, Blanchfield, Fior, who's not necessarily a prospect, but hasn't fought for the belt yet. There's names on names, and they wipe the floor with majority of people from 120, 115 if they decided to come up.
yeah, even if you go like further, um, you're looking the 10 to 15. You've got you've got Jasmine Judavicius, Tracy Cortez, Hebas, Karine Silva, Casey O'Neill. Like these are like legit prospects. Natalia Silva's 5, like you said. Like there's a lot more there to be excited about. And I don't know who makes the rankings, but like, can we not rank Jasmine Judavicius ahead of Tracy Cortez when we saw them fight and we saw Tracy win? But
Mm.
that's a whole another point of discussion. At 115, you're really looking at Yan Xiaonan, and everything else is like,
Yeah, I agree. I think Yao Xiaonan is if Wei Li moves up, vacates the belt, she will be the next champion, in my
yeah,
opinion.
she can't grapple though. So that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah, yeah.
But
There's so many flaws in 115 because 115 used to be a premier division. And,
115 and 125 swapped, in my opinion.
yep, agreed.
Uh,
Partially because a lot of them moved up to 125.
that is true. And Joanna retired, and
Yep, exactly.
Carla retiring. It was due, but like she was in that division for a long time, and
Yep.
it's a name, and yeah. All right, let's hit UFC 312 final thoughts?
Before we do,
Yeah, go
what do
ahead.
you want to see? Who do you want to see Tatiana Suarez fight next? Just out of curiosity, more than anything.
Mm.
You don't really care.
I kind of don't care, but I will give you a name. Um, I don't think that I think Tatiana and Dern would be a fun matchup. I think that's one I wouldn't hate.
Depends on which Stern shows up. The one who remembers how that she's a goddess at jujitsu or not. But
Yeah, exactly. That's part of the fun of a Mackenzie Dern fight.
oh yeah,
Um, Lucindo, I probably wouldn't go quite that high with Lucindo. I think she needs one more, but like Janjiroba, maybe, but like who knows? She might get the title fight depending on how it goes. So like, shit, your
yeah.
guess is as good as mine. I don't really have an answer that I love.
Well, that's fair. Yeah, I'm actually now looking at these names. And I'm like, yeah, Jandiroba maybe if she doesn't get the title fight next.
Yeah.
You could just put her against Yao Xiaonan, and then that ruins her if she's not able to take a takedown. Or she beats arguably the second best fighter in this division, and suddenly the hype train's back on. So
Yeah, that's true.
don't hate that. Otherwise, like, don't need to see her fight Amanda Lemos. Don't need to see her fight Jessica Andrade again. Rose Namajunas come down and fight her, but that would be an ugly fight as well. So
Yeah, I agree. All right, final thoughts. There isn't a ton to pick from. I will let you lead off, and I will pick up some of the scraps that are left behind. Anything that stood out to you on the UFC 312 prelims, and I mean, should also mention the rest of the main card as well. So whatever meets your eye, wherever it lands in the card.
I mean, one of the ones is Ilya Taporia's brother, Alexander Taporia, beating Colby Thickness, whatever it is.
Thickness is the correct
Okay,
pronunciation.
that's what I thought it was. And I was like, there's no way. But no, like that one, the hype was, my excitement about that fight wasn't that. It was the fact that Ilya was in one corner and Volkanovski was in the other. It was honestly a pretty boring fight. Taporia just kind of laid on top, landed a couple big shots early, but that was it. But what I will say, and we talked about this a little before, 19 seconds into the entire card, Quillen Salkild gets the knockout in 19 seconds. Hell of a way to open up the card. Hell of a way to make a statement in front of your home country crowd. Props to him.
Couple of ones that stood out to me. I think Zhu Rong was Cody versus Cody Steele was one of the better fights on the
Yeah.
card. Cody was a guy I really, really liked on contenders. And I've got a pretty decent track record on guys that I put in the top tier of contenders. Cody went out there and lost his debut, so it was a little bit of a disappointment for me. Kind of looked like he was in there to have more fun than win. You know, it looked like he was thrilled at the idea of getting hit in the head, and think he got concussed and he didn't really grapple much. So I don't know if I'm ready to write Cody Steele off yet, but I certainly do not have as high of hopes as I did before. I think the skill is there, but that's one of the things you have to deal with when you're looking at contenders is sometimes the skill is there, then you find out something else major is wrong, whether it be mindset, like wanting to just go out there and have fun, whether it be mindset or some guys don't have chins, some guys you find out don't have cardio, some guys you find out don't like to get hit in the face. I loved Kino Shicha coming off contenders, but then he started getting the hit in the face and then he didn't like fighting anymore. And I was like, well, I didn't know that before I said he was good. So you kind of have to deal with some of those bumps and bruises when you're taking contenders here as prospects. But like I said, the skill is all there. So I hope Steele shows some improvements and looks good in the future. Jimmy Crute looked far better than I expected. I thought he was going to be like, oh, this guy's coming back for one more. He looked like motivated and good. He gassed out like he usually does. That was, to be honest, was an above average Jimmy Crute performance. He was just fighting a guy who can take a licking and come back and win the late round. So it was kind of balanced out to a draw, which is kind of what I would expect from like the best version of Jimmy Crute, to be honest. So like, I don't think this was a wash portion.
Give me 30 seconds. Someone's knocking at my door, so I'll let
All
you
right,
just real quick.
you're good. Well, Jerry, attempts to that. I will keep going on about the prelims and some of these main card fights. Talison Chisera versus Justin Tafa. Teixeira looked good, but like it's also you're not really taking much away from a 30-second fight. Jake Matthews versus Francisco Prado. Prado's too small for the weight class, and I don't know that he can go back down. He's also in his mid-20s. So, like, you're kind of dealing with a guy, or he's in his early 20s. I think he's 22. So, go down, and now you're going to eventually have to, before you hit your prime, you have to move up again. He's in a really tricky spot, not even thinking about where his like skills line up. He's in a tricky spot just from a weight perspective. Jake Matthews also a really, really tough matchup for your UFC or for a fight that is like your first fight in the welterweight division and you're coming up from lightweight as a young guy. Another fight here, Tom Nolan versus Slaviklaus Vaishev Borishev. Tom Nolan goes out there, wins. I have fluttered my opinion on Tom Nolan a little bit. But Vaishev Borishev, I think, looked relatively washed there. So I don't know how impressive the performance was. All right, Jerry.
Which fight were you talking about there?
I actually got through all the fights that I was interested in talking about. Not that I'm uninterested in talking about the other fights, but the real points that I wanted to hit, I hit, and then I started knocking out some of the other fights. So I've got everything off my chest for 312.
I will say the only other one I would like to bring up, and I don't know if you did while I was dealing with whatever the hell that was. I don't know who lets people into an apartment complex to go around knocking on doors, but hey, that's beside the point. Wang Kong, the Joker, beat Bruna Brazil, who was dressed up as Batman for their face-off. Joker finally got one over Batman. I'll put that one out there.
I'm not a Bruna Brazil fan anymore. I used to be, and this is my Bruna Brazil experience. I bet Bruna Brazil to win as an underdog. She loses. Next time, she's an underdog again, and I go, oh, I'm not going to bet Bruna this time. She looked like trash last time, and then she wins. And then her next fight, she's still an underdog. And I go, Bruna got it done last time. I'll get her this time. And then she loses. Cycle repeats. I hit 0 bets, and she managed to cash as like a plus 300 underdog multiple times. So the Bruna Brazil experience, I'm done for. But we did get Gabriela Fernandez as a big underdog against Wang Kong. So if you put both of these fighters together, I am plus money. But Bruna Brazil has significantly worked me back closer towards 0 than I would like to admit for a low-level women's flyweight fight. So
yeah. Very understandable. That is a hell of an experience. The ups and downs of the Bruna Brazil career.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's take it over to UFC Vegas 102. Main event, Jared Cannonier versus Gregory Hobocop Rodrigues. Cannonier has been at the top of the middleweight division for a while, fighting great fighters, but he has slipped in his last 2 fights against Nasruddin Imavov and Kyle Barajo, both guys we were just talking about in that title picture. Now he slides further down the rankings to fight Gregory Rodrigues, who is 7-2, I believe, in the UFC. Fan-friendly fighter, lots of fun fights, good skill. What do you make of this fight? That pretty big crossroads matchup. One guy, 40 years old, sliding down the rankings. Gregory Rodrigues flying up the rankings and getting a chance to crack into the rankings with a win over Cannonier, which is virtually would have been unheard of 2 years ago. A guy breaking into the rankings with a win over Cannonier.
Yeah, and that's my thing. I personally, I think this is a retirement fight for Jerry Cannonier. Win or lose, you've lost 3 straight. And don't get me wrong, the 2 guys who we just lost to, 2 of the best prospects in this division. One of them's ranked number 1 in the world after the champion. One of them's in the top 6. Those aren't bad losses. These guys are just, it's the new generation coming in. They beat him. But at the same time, it's like, if you can't beat a 32-year-old who, I guess his big win was what? Christian Leroy Duncan was last time in England. Beat Brad Tavares, but Brad Tavares has fallen off the cliff. I just don't see this as like a marquee matchup nearly as much as some other fights. I'm curious to see what happens. I just don't know what to expect for Cannonier at this point in his career, especially after 2 big losses like that. Got flatlined by Nasruddin Imavov, so nice knockout there. But I'm like little skeptical of both of them, and I'm gonna lean Gregory Rodrigues just because Cannonier's so much older, and he's looked rough in his last few fights. But I'm by no means confident in that pick.
Yeah. So just for like transparency, well, it's not even being transparent. It's just a matter of the fact, like, leader of the Jared Cannonier fan club might be me. Um, every time we're on here, I've said so many positive things about Jared Cannonier. I pulled up my pick history on Jared Cannonier fights. Had him beaten Brawlho, Imavov, Vettori, and Strickland. So I've picked him to win his last 4 fights. Had Izzy beating him, but prior to that, had Brunson beating him. And that as far as my tracked picks go, all the way back to 2021. So ever since I started tracking picks, even before I worked at Vendetta, I had only picked Cannonier aside from the Izzy fight. I picked Gregory Rodrigues to win this fight. So it's not like I'm trying to abandon the ship on my man, but at 40 years old, Jared Cannonier, my concerns, there's 2 things: is durability and speed, and they're both on the decline, and both of them work against one another because he is slower than he used to be. So now he's getting countered more than he used to, and now that he's getting countered more than he used to, he's getting hit more than he's used to. On top of already having the durability slide, um, on top of like reaction speed and things like that. So the physical attributes, I think mentally he's just as good as he used to be. But I think physically he's really deteriorating in those 2 aspects. That said, in this fight, Gregory Rodrigues brings the action, and like I don't want to make it seem like we're sending a dead body out there. Like Jared Cannonier still throws really hard. Yeah, he throws really hard. He does not gas out. At least he hasn't historically. He will sit down on shots in the pocket. When Imavov had him hurt, he was ripping and looking for counters. Like Gregory Rodrigues is not the poster child for durability, even though he's 32. He's the 8-year younger fighter. Like he has been knocked out clean before as well. So like Gregory Rodrigues gets hurt too. So I don't want to make it seem like Cannonier is the only one with durability problems, because I do not trust Gregory Rodrigues' durability, and Jared Cannonier may just blitz him and knock him out cold. But I think the more likely outcome is Gregory Rodrigues landing the big shots, because the last 2 guys to hurt Cannonier, that being Imavov and that being Brawlho, both those guys were landing quick shots straight down the pipe, and that is something Gregory Rodrigues is really good at. He's also a capable counter. He counters jabs. Cannonier throws a lot of jabs, and I just mentioned that he's slower, so he gets countered more. So I think, the things that Gregory Rodrigues does well kind of lines up in the areas where Cannonier is starting to slide, and I was watching Cannonier against Brawlho, and I so wanted to pick him to win this fight. Um, he even had some good moments in that fight, even though he lost fair and square. Probably should have been stopped in round 5, but like Cannonier went out there, landed some big shots, had him put a massive cut on Brawlho. Cannonier is still really, really good from a skills perspective, but the things that he can't control are slipping, and I don't think that bodes well here. And fact of the matter is, Greg Rodrigues is a guy I think the UFC would love to get ranked and love getting in some fun fights. He's a consistently entertaining fighter. He's 32 years old. There's a lot more tread on the tires with Rodrigues than Cannonier. Cannonier's 40, has been hit really hard his last couple fights. He's a guy that's just screaming, gonna slide here. And I think the UFC picked very wisely with who they want to break into the rankings. So they could have picked a lot of pop fighters, but they picked Rodrigues for a reason. So I think it's Rodrigues here.
I will say my one concern with Rodrigues is he's never fought in a 5-round fight. I don't know what his stamina is going to be like, and we saw Jerry Cannonier's last 5 fights were all 5-rounders. All but one of them went to a decision. And that was the Imavov fight where he got finished in the 4th round. And correct me if I'm wrong, that was the one that was a little skeptical, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Also, in one of those 5-round fights, I believe it was the Vittori fight, but if I remember correctly, he broke the record for significant strikes landed in a
Jeez.
middleweight fight. So, um, like the guy's sensational. If I pulled I think I might as well have it up, but not only am I picking him to win fights, but the last two fights, Barajo and Imavov, pick him round 4 KOs in both instances. Didn't really mean for it not to be round 4, but the thought process behind picking round 4 is a cardio thing. Really respect his cardio historically throughout his career.
And that's the thing. He's not the same durability. He's not the same stamina or same speed, but he's still surviving long fights. And that's the one thing where I think if he can get to the middle of the 4th round, into the 5th round, he has a damn good chance of wearing Gregory Rodrigues down because, I mean, his longest fight's been 3 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
And that was his last fight, was I guess, second to third of his career that's really gone to a full decision. Maybe he might have had a few more earlier, but third one he's won by decision. And I'm like, that's always a concern in the back of my mind whenever it's someone who's never fought a full 5-round fight. He's never been a main event. It is, I believe this is at the Apex, isn't it? Yeah. That helps a little bit, I think, for Rodrigues, because if this is in front of a crowd, you've never been the main event in front of a bunch of crowd, that is probably going to favor and cheer for Jerry Cannonier more. So that's my only worry about Gregory Rodrigues, is that he gets a little tired later on. And to your point, Jerry Cannonier might be able to just pull something out, and he punches hard still. So if he can get it, he could get it done in the late rounds. That's the only way I see him winning, but I am still taking Gregory Rodrigues.
Yep. And I would like to add to that. I'm not trying to disagree with you, but Rodrigues has never been a guy that has struck me as someone who is live to gas out. Like I'd never.
Yeah, no.
A good way to put this is in a 3-round fight, I've never been concerned about his durability. With that being said, you do never know going into a 5-rounder. Like it's not like you could be someone who looks good over 3, and you can find out the hard way that 5 is different, especially the first time around. So,
no. I completely agree with that. With the way you put it, I'm like just thinking that's the only way I can see Jared Cannonier winning this fight is if somehow he does gas out in the late rounds. Not saying he will, but that's the only way I see him winning.
Yep. All right, moving on down to the co-main event. We've got a very similar matchup: Calvin Kattar versus Youssef Zalal. Zalal came back to the UFC after being cut off a 3-3-1 UFC run. He was cut because it was 3 wins and then 3 losses and then 1 draw. So all of his losses and draws came on 1 contract. That's why he was cut. 3-3-1 is, if you win 1, lose 1, consistently sneak the draw in there, you won't get cut. But when you lose 3 in a row and then get hit with the draw, the cut is a concern, a possibility. Wins a few fights on the regional scene. I don't remember the exact number, but when I say a few, it was multiple. Impressive performance.
He won 3 on the regional scene after he got cut.
Yep, 3-0 on the regional scene. He's come back to the UFC, has won 3, all impressive wins. So that has earned him a ranked fight, deservedly so. The ranked opponent is Calvin Kattar, who can draw a lot of similarities towards Jared Cannonier, just a little bit of differences in in Kattar's case. He had an ACL tear that he worked through prior to the Aljamain Sterling fight. So the Sterling fight at UFC 300 was his first fight back from injury. So that's the Kattar thing. But from a longer perspective, he's 3 consecutive losses, 1-4 in his last 5 fights for Calvin Kattar. And that is the obvious Max Holloway beatdown. Then he's got the win over Giga. Then close decision loss against Josh Emmett. Arnold Allen, where he hurt the knee. And then Sterling out-grappled in the comeback. So that has been the run for Kattar. He's got to come in here, show that he still deserves his ranking. What do you make of the matchup, and how do you think the fight goes?
I mean, that's my concern. You brought it up with that Aljamain Sterling fight. Calvin Kattar just got taken down and just out-grappled. Zalal's last 3 wins have all been by submission. The last 4 wins, I guess, actually, have all been by submission. He's got 9 submission wins out of his 16. He's a guy who's going to take you down and try and grapple you and try and submit you. And I don't see how Calvin Kattar stops it. If he couldn't stop Aljamain Sterling, and don't get me wrong, Aljamain Sterling was a dog, and he's great at the grappling. But this is also his first. Was it his first fight moving up a division? Right? Yeah, this was his first time. Guy coming up a division. This is a guy who's been fighting at this division since he more or less returned to the UFC, and that's my concern. I just don't know if Calvin Kattar has the strength and the energy to piece you up the entire time without giving up the occasional takedown. And once he gives up the takedown, I don't see him getting back up against a guy like Zalal that can smother you. So that's my concerns there. I think this will be a more no, I don't think it'll be quite as entertaining as the Cannonier fight, but it can be. I think this is a higher potential to be more entertaining. I don't think it will be because I think Zalal will get Kattar on the ground and kind of do what he did to what Alja did to him, and just roll around, keep him on the ground, not let him back up, and dominate the time of control.
Yeah, I Calvin Kattar, pulling up all my picks on Calvin Kattar fights. Started taking picks in 2021. I picked Max Holloway against him. So there's that. But then after that, picked him again, or I actually picked Gigas. So that was probably because after the Max beating. But Emmett, Allen, Sterling, picked Kattar in all of them.
Yep.
Wrong on all of them. So Kattar's another guy. I love Calvin Kattar. I love his boxing. I love that straight right. His knockout over Jeremy Stevens is one of my favorites. That is nasty. A lot of skills that I like from Calvin Kattar. The way that he throws in combinations. There's a lot of things I love, but this is just a god-awful matchup.
Yep.
Even in the striking realm, Calvin Kattar, the one thing that he struggles with is guys who are quick. Youssef Zalal, I'd consider his grappling his primary skill, but he is fleet of foot. He is quick. He gets in and out of the pocket. He's not coming in and out with, massive shots, but he's in with the jab, but he's out. He doesn't get hit. In and out consistently. And he does it very fast, very efficiently, and he doesn't eat a lot of shots. And Calvin Kattar, coming back from a knee injury, first of all, he's just not that guy who's fleet of foot chasing guys down, but now he's coming off a knee injury as well. So that's a big concern. And then you rope in the grappling aspect of things where, yeah, Aljamain Sterling's a sensational grappler, and credit to him for that performance. But, like, my God, Kattar looked like he had never grappled before. It wasn't the fact that he was out grappled. It's how bad he was out grappled by.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even like the takedown and oop, I slipped you in a body triangle. It is pure control, consistent takedowns. And, like, there's moments in there where Sterling is entering for a takedown from miles away. Hands are out. And I'm just like, man, the Calvin Kattar I know would have sat down on a cross right there and just ended the show.
Yeah.
And he didn't. He was a much more reactionary. And he was just out grappled. And in this fight, I just think that, whether it's Zalal bouncing in and out without getting hit, because he doesn't get hit a ton because he's so good at that. And then also, next thing you know, now we're bouncing in and out with the jab, with the cross, with the hook. Now he's in, but he's at my hips. And now he's mixing it up and he's getting the takedowns, and just seems like a god-awful matchup for Calvin Kattar, not only at this stage of his career, but just holistically. Yeah. In general, it's a bad matchup. And you put him at this stage of his career where he's been in every war you can imagine under the sun. That's part of the reason I love the guy, the amount of great fights he's had in the UFC and the amount of damage he's taken. I mean, the Max Holloway losses, that counts for who knows how many knockout losses that should count for.
Yeah.
Honestly, that should like 10 maybe.
That was a beating by Max Holloway.
So it's just two things coming together at the same time. Bad matchup, bad timing. So I think Zalal gets it done. I don't know if he gets the finish, but I think he wins clear as day, like 30-27. Maybe he doesn't get the finish, but it'll be a dominant one.
Yeah, I don't think he gets the finish necessarily. I think he doesn't need to get the finish. I think he just controls him and, to your point, wins 30-27 pretty convincingly on the decision.
Yeah.
But there's always a chance. Calvin Kattar out of nowhere brings back his old boxing skill, but
I mean, if you're telling me Kelvin Kattar landed a cross that knocked him out, I wouldn't exactly be shocked because it's Kelvin Kattar, and he also, I mean, talking about featherweights that hit hard, he's on the short list. I mean, there's a lot of featherweights who hit. You got your Josh Emmets, and you got your Taporias, and Kelvin Kattar don't hit quite that hard, but like, don't sit down and eat his cross all night long. You know what I mean? He hits hard. All right, let's hit some final thoughts on UFC Vegas 102. How the numbers add up. What stands out to you on the rest of this UFC Vegas card?
Not a lot, really. The name that stands out just because of who he is, the second fight of the card, Dontel Mays fighting Walter Walker, who's the brother of Johnny Walker. I think that's going to be an absolutely disgusting fight. I don't think it's going to be pretty to watch, but it's just I'm hoping someone gets flatlined. It's heavyweights. Heavyweights are always that optimistic part, but at the same time, it could be two heavyweights who just kind of lay on top of each other and don't do anything in this case.
And Dontel Mays, 11-7 in his career. Is he
Yep.
ranked in the heavyweight division?
Yep.
Yes, he
You know it. He's won what? He's won 2 of his last 3 or last 5. One of those was against Andre Arlovsky.
Winning 2 of your last 5 is a great way of saying losing 3 of your last 5.
Exactly. Well, I guess
a very kind way.
He's won 2 of his last 6 because he had a no contest in there.
I also think he lost the no contest and it got switched because Hamdi Abdelawab popped for PEDs. So
yeah, you're right. Yeah, it was.
If you just go watch the fight, it doesn't get a. It's not. They don't announce it as a no contest in there.
No, that is very fair. Other ones, I'm kind of excited for. God, I mean, this is a rough card. Really,
I can hit some if you'd like.
I'll let you go for that. I mean, the only other. Yeah, go ahead.
I like Nazim Sadikov and Ishmael Bonfim. I kind of like Sadikov as a fighter. I don't want to make it seem like I'm the leader of the fan club like I am for Jared Cannonier, but I do like his skills and think he's a guy that I like keeping tabs on. Fighting Ishmael Bonfim. Both the Bonfim brothers are on this card. They both have a lot of hype. So those are guys I just generally keep an eye on. Finishers, but if they don't get the finish, they usually fall off a cliff. Chaos Williams is the one fighting older brother Gabriel. Chaos missiles in his hands. Shout out to him because he is from Michigan. Didn't mean to do it, but I just kind of naturally bet against both Bonfim brothers. One's plus 180, one's plus 190. We hit one of them, and we're leaving with money in our pockets on the Bonfim brothers as long as one of them loses. So, I took Sadikov and I took Chaos. I also like watching Adolfo Vieira and Andre Petrosky from a grappling perspective. Vieira he wasn't given the name the black belt hunter. He got that by submitting people with black belts. So, and he got submitted by Fluffy Hernandez. So what does that say about Fluffy? But point being, for anyone who likes grappling, think that's a good one. And then I'll also shout out Angela Hill, still doing the thing. Got Ketlin Souza in there. Can she take out another young gun? I don't know, but I'm always interested in finding out. So
that was gonna be the next one I brought up was Angela Hill and Ketlin Souza, solely because Angela Hill's 40, Souza's 29. They both fought a lot. So curious to see with Souza coming off 2 straight wins after losing her UFC debut. So.
Yep.
And Angela Hill somehow still going. Somehow.
Winning fights as well. She's looking good. I believe she's winning fights recently. I'd have to double check, but I know she beat
she lost her last fight against Tabitha Ritchie, but won the 2 prior.
Yeah, Pinero and
Gomez.
Denise Gomes. And then prior to that was newly divorced Dern just going on. I mean, talking about Dern knowing when she's good, like that was one, like if you had to be like, what's Dern's best performance? I'd say the Angela Hill fight.
Yep.
Had nothing. It's nothing bad about Angela Hill, but that was just the best.
Dern was determined, and you knew she was going to come in with a vengeance.
Yep, 25 minutes of insane cardio, pace, power, grappling.
Yeah, it was domination.
It was. Last fight I'll shout out. Actually, I forgot this one. Elijah Smith and Vincent Morales. Elijah Smith, a guy I liked on Contenders. I think he looked really good from a technical aspect. For being very, very young. on Dana White Contenders here. So he's a guy I liked on Contenders. I also like Cody Steele, and he lost last week. So historically, I've been good at picking out guys who are good on Contenders, and I hope that continues. So I'd like Elijah Smith to turn the boat around for me, just on a personal note of scouting Contender Series fighters. So Elijah Smith, the guy I'm looking out for. Vince Morales, not a bad fighter. Came back from getting cut as well. Made a lot of improvements. Not quite as many as Zalal, like we talked about earlier, but has gotten much better. So Morales is a tough matchup for a UFC debut, despite it being a second tenure in the UFC. So I'd be impressed if Elijah Smith got his hand raised there, but I think he has the skills to get it done.
I think there will be some entertaining fights. It's not the biggest names in the world on this card. It is a UFC Apex right after a pay-per-view, but next weekend there are some big names. So I think it was also a part of that where they're like, we need a February fight night. Let's load up one in front of the fans instead of this one. But should be some violence, should be some entertainment. Still going to be worth watching.
Yeah, unfortunately, the UFC Seattle card next week is just falling apart.
It's so sad.
It went from being one of the best fight nights I've seen in a really long time to losing Rob Font versus Dominic Cruz, Edson Barbosa versus Steve Garcia, Curtis Blades versus Rizvan Kunaev. All 3 fights canceled, and they still have 2 really, really good fights in the main and co-main event. We had 3 great fights get canceled, and we still have 2 really good ones on the card. So cross your fingers, no more cancellations.
And hey, we still got a guy named Touchy Feely fighting
versus Melchiesa Costa, who is fun to watch. I am actually really excited for that fight. Just
that's gonna be
completely underrated. I am hyped for that fight.
Yeah.
All right. We'll skip out on the Emmett and Laurel Murphy talk because we went longer than we thought we were going to go, based off the slate that we had. But I'm happy about that because we were able to get our rants off about Sean Strickland and such. So, we'll be back next week with it's in between 2 fight night cards, but like I said, we had the 2 fights we previewed today. Next week we've got Henry Cejudo versus Song Yadong and Brendan Allen versus Anthony Hernandez. So there's 2 ranked fights next week. So it's not, yeah. And one of those ranked fights is like highly ranked bantamweights. It really doesn't get better than that, in my opinion. So I'm pumped for that card. So we'll have something to talk about, and hopefully the UFC 314 main event can be announced. That'd be nice. But at this point, I'm not crossing my fingers. So we'll be back next week to talk about that. Jerry, it was good to have you back on. And thank you to everyone.
Been a few weeks off. Glad to be back. So
Yep. We'll be back next week as well, obviously. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. Make sure you like and subscribe. Head to Vendetta Sports Media for more UFC content. Should have the preview for UFC Vegas 1 and 2 up. We obviously talked about the main and co-main, but this preview extends to all 5 fights. Get the whole crew's predictions in there. So make sure to tune in for that. And best bets will probably be up it probably won't be up when this is posted. It'll probably be up shortly after. So if you're hearing about best bets right now, it might be up, it might not be up, but it will be up soon. Hopefully, when you're listening to this. So not confusing at all. But what you need to know is that you need to like, subscribe, and come back next week. That's the important message. And thank you for tuning in. That's an important one as well.